Guys, we have to talk about my predictions halving and post halving now. Now, this has changed a little bit since last time because of the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. And yes, they do matter because Bitcoin basically started going down the second that Iran threatened to do something, and then it went down again basically the second Iran launched the attack. It's recovered a little bit now, but people are still very, very nervous. And yes, big geopolitical events do cause sudden drawbacks. It was the same way when Russia attacked Ukraine. We had a massive dump basically at that moment. Generally, these things do recover back, but if escalation in the Middle East continues, that might actually affect the Fed interest rates and inflation rates, and that will have a much longer term impact on the United States. Obviously, Joe Biden doesn't really want a war in the election year, and that'll affect things as well. So, what are my predictions? During the halving, I expect the rest of this week to be somewhat upwards, and unless Israel decides to retaliate sometime this week, I expect it to be somewhat upwards / neutral going into the halving, and I don't expect the halving to actually do that much immediately on the price. Now, there might be a slight dip after the halving because there's going to be some miners that start to sell off. But there might be a little bit of a more negative sentiment now because of the situation in the Middle East. I thought we were going to head into the halving above 70K. It doesn't look like we're going to do that now because of the Iran-Israel thing, and people are scared. Remember, when people are frightened, especially gamblish investors, which crypto is full of, they're going to hold back on buying. So I think that's definitely going to impact what's going to happen with prices this week and next week. Benjamin Netanyahu unfortunately thinks he's King David and he wants to reconquer all of Israel. The United States has told him to kind of take a seat because we won't support him in any offensive he makes. But he's kind of waiting for the U.S. to get into position so when he takes an offensive and Iran counterstrikes, the U.S. can shoot the counterstrike missiles down. I think he's planning to use the U.S. that way. And the U.S. will actually shoot the incoming missiles into Israel, although we won't launch any missiles into Iran. So that's going to affect it that way. I don't think Netanyahu is going to just give up on this because Israel's war council has already decided they're going to take clear and decisive action. We just don't really know when or what that action is going to be, but it is very likely, maybe even more than likely, that it's going to happen this week or next week, and that's going to be kind of at least a mini black swan event. It's not going to be a gigantic black swan event because we've already had the Iranian attack, and some people I think are expecting an Israeli counteroffensive or a counterattack using missiles. I don't think there's going to be a land war into Iran because Israel can't cross Iraq into Iran. Iraq's not going to let them do that. Iraq also is not going to allow their airspace to be used. Although I'm not exactly sure if Israel is really going to pay too much attention to that at this point. So hopefully, my hope is that Netanyahu backs off and doesn't do anything. But we know Benjamin Netanyahu is kind of a warmonger. He's been basically looking for an excuse to take out Iran's nuclear program at this point. So there's a lot going on there, and he really wants to make use of this opportunity. I don't really know if he's going to do surgical strikes or surgical airstrikes. We know that Iran's anti-air capabilities are not as good as Israel's Iron Dome. So if Israel were to strike Iran, many of those missiles would hit, which would prompt a retaliatory strike from Iran, which mostly probably would be shot down by U.S. forces in the area and Israeli forces. So we got to take account into that stuff happening. This is not an easy thing to actually decide, but I am slightly more bearish, at least in the next month or two, about what's going to happen because of world affairs. Usually world affairs don't really worry me too much, but because people in crypto and people in the stock market altogether, they tend to really react when things can escalate, and this thing can definitely escalate. I do actually think this will have an effect. Now, I don't think this effect will last much later than midsummer or something, because I think by that time it will actually calm down. And realistically, if Israel had not attacked Iran's embassy in Syria, Iran would not have launched the strike. They didn't launch the strike on behalf of Gaza. They launched a strike particularly because Israel destroyed their embassy, I think, in Syria. So, the thing is, I think there is a way for kind of a ceasefire negotiation between the two countries, as long as Netanyahu is willing to back down. But the if Netanyahu is willing to back down thing is a huge, huge deal. And I hope, some of his cabinet start overruling him. They are a very far-right government, and they are really warmongerish, which really has me worried at this point. Obviously, Netanyahu essentially just wants to take over West Bank and Gaza Strip. I think that's always kind of been his goal. And he's going to take every opportunity and every excuse to do so. And the only way the U.S. can kind of convince him to not do so is withhold support. But even if we do that, Israel's military is quite capable. They have F-35s. They have the latest hardware because the U.S. has been supporting them for like 6 decades or more. And right now, that's bringing uncertainty not only to the crypto market, but to the stock market as well. And they're going to kind of flow in unison over this. So the halving itself, I don't think will actually produce that many results. Yes, we'll have a halving stream. And yeah, there might be some miner selling after the halving, but I don't think we'll have a giant miner dump unless Netanyahu decides to counterattack on Iran during that week, and Iran decides to counterattack, and that escalates. I can see that bringing us down below 60,000 if it blows up really, really big. Although, I don't think it'll affect the real trajectory of the ultimate bull run we have over the next year all that much. I do think in the next couple of months that could affect it if that happens. Now, as you've seen, people have basically gotten used to the Ukraine war, so that doesn't really affect the market all that much. And I think eventually people will get used to a regional conflict in the Middle East. I do not think that it will drag other powers into boots on the ground. Everyone's kind of busy with their own affairs. And I don't think the other big Islamic powers like Saudi Arabia or Egypt will actually help come in and help Iran with this. I think Iran's just going to fight Israel on its own, along with Hezbollah and the Houthis and stuff and their satellites. But I think ultimately it won't be like a boots on the ground type war. It'll be kind of like an aerial warfare. And I do think it'll quiet down after a few months if it intensifies at all. But I'm afraid that there could be further dips. So hold some of that dry powder available just in case geopolitical tensions escalate. I don't think Israel's going to use any nukes, but we know they have them. And I don't think Iran's going to use nukes either, because I'm not really sure if Iran actually has them right now, or they not have the delivery system to actually get them to Israel. So I don't think it's going to be a nuclear war, but it could be a pretty big conventional blowup in the Middle East that could drag Iraq along with it, because obviously you have to cross Iraq to get to Iran from Israel. So it's going to be kind of a tense situation, and we'll see what Israel and Iran does. And that is really, really going to affect the market a lot, because without it, I would expect maybe a slight dip after the halving before we go up. But right now, there's an ominous atmosphere, and it could actually stay a little bit lower for a little bit longer. Ultimately, it has to rise above 80K just for the miners themselves. But right now, the situation is quite uncertain, and we could actually stay at 60Ks for a while, maybe even dip down in the 50Ks if there's retaliatory action. And this will happen pretty much the minute or the hour they decide to retaliate. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.